A major victory for President Trump, seeking to push his trial back to after the elections. The Supreme Court today rejecting a request to expedite its review of Trump's presidential immunity claim, dealing a blow to special counsel Jack Smith. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao, who's in front of the Supreme Court. Good evening, Iris. If you could tell us more about the order and how it could impact Trump's legal schedule.
Good evening to you, Steve. So the Friday order by the High Court actually is very simple. It only has one page, one sentence, and it's a very simple and straight denial of special counsel Jack Smith's request to basically ask the Supreme Court to directly weigh in and circumvent the lower appellate court and also jump in to decide on the issue of whether former President Trump has presidential immunity as he claims for his actions surrounding the 2020 election. And Jack Smith, in asking the Supreme Court to do that, says that it's an urgent decision needed on an important constitutional question, adding that is to prevent any delays to Trump's trial, which is scheduled for March 4th, 2024. And Trump, meanwhile, has been criticizing the trial date, which is a day before Super Tuesday, declaring election interference. His team also this week accused Jack Smith of trying to rush to decide the issues with reckless abandon. And now with today's order, it means that the case will now go through the normal appealing process, which is through the D.C. Circuit Appellate Court here. And also it means that original trial date scheduled for March 4th could well be upended. And the oral arguments for the lower court here is scheduled for January 19th. But no matter who wins here in the lower court, we can expect either side to appeal to the Supreme Court, which will ultimately still have to weigh on this question, just not in Jack Smith manner, not expedited, but in a normal appealing process, which is what Trump will like to see because the trial date will now be postponed. Steve.
So, Iris, the chances of having a Trump trial right before Super Tuesday, which seemed to have been the plan, does seem to have been upended now. So tell us about the potential impact this may have on the 2024 election.
So a New York Times poll shows that more than 80% of Trump supporters say that they agree that a lot of these allegations and trials and indictments against Trump are politically motivated. But the same poll also shows that over a quarter of these Trump supporters also think that they might not support Trump anymore as the Republican presidential candidate if he's actually convicted of any of these alleged crimes. So that really highlights the importance of Trump's team's strategy here in trying to delay these trials beyond potentially the 2024 elections, and today's order definitely might help Trump when it comes to the presidential election here. Steve.
NTD's Iris Tao reporting for us live in front of the Supreme Court. Thank you, Iris. This year was a historic one for Congress, from the ouster of House Speaker Kevin McCarthy to Vice President Kamala Harris breaking the record for tie-breaking votes in the thinly divided Senate. And next year already setting up to be even bumpier, with many high-priority items kicked down the road. Here's NTD's congressional correspondent Melina Wisecup with hits and misses from this year and what lawmakers still have to tackle in the year ahead.
Back to January of 2023, an embattled Kevin McCarthy takes the gavel. He went through 15 rounds of voting on the House floor, only to resign from Congress now after he was ousted from his speakership post.
Well, I'll be departing the House at the end of this year.
Speaker Mike Johnson now dealing with an even slimmer majority after Republicans kicked out one of their own.
This is bullying.
That slim majority has proven crippling for Republicans, who have yet to pass their annual spending bills. Democrats, meanwhile, sticking together on most issues, with one exception being how to handle the Israel-Hamas war.
Y'all, the United Nations General Assembly supports a ceasefire.
22 Democrats voting against one of their own, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, censuring her over her criticism of Israel. And many find it hard to forget a few head-turning acts from individual lawmakers, like Congressman Jamal Bowman sounding the fire alarm, and Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell's 2 episodes of freezing mid-sentence. Congress passed 27 bills that became law this year, including ending the COVID-19 pandemic emergency, declassifying information on the origin of COVID, and overturning a D.C. crime law that would ease consequences for violent criminals. All areas where Republicans and Democrats were unified in 2023. Plus a debt ceiling deal negotiated by former Speaker Kevin McCarthy in the White House, which is now proving difficult for lawmakers to stick to.
Most of the American people won't even miss if the government to shut down temporarily.
The issue at the forefront of 2024's agenda, plus finding a solution to mobilize Israel aid, Ukraine aid, and solutions on the southern border. We'll also likely see an official vote on impeaching DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas and an impeachment vote of President Biden. These are topics that become even more difficult to navigate during the election year of 2024. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
We're reportedly seeing more people enter the United States illegally this month than ever before. Mexico's president now saying he'll assist the U.S. in tackling the immigration crisis. NTD's Arian Pazdar has an update on the border.
More people are entering the United States illegally this week. Fox News on Friday published this video of African men arriving at the southern border, saying only 2 border agents were on the scene to process all of the people you see here. CBP tells the outlet that there have been 45,000 encounters at the border since Monday, able to fill Yankee Stadium in just 4 days. Monday was the highest day of encounters ever recorded, with 12,600. December is on pace to become the highest month ever. Many say they're heading for sanctuary cities.
Nueva York.
New York.
Chicago.
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 Chicago. Mexico's president on Friday acknowledged the situation is getting worse.
We will boost as much as we can to help maintain an orderly flow of migrants. Recently, there was an abnormal surge of migrants.
He now says he'll step up efforts on Mexico's southern border with Guatemala and seek agreements to manage higher numbers of immigrants attempting to enter the U.S. Meanwhile, Texas is now reportedly adding anti-climbing technology to its fences in Brownsville. That's by erecting 12-foot-tall fences laced with 3 feet of concertina wire. This comes just days after a court temporarily prohibited the federal government from removing the state's razor wires. And lastly, in New York City, the United Federation of Teachers is suing Mayor Eric Adams. Back in November, Adams warned of budget cuts for city services.
It's going to be extremely painful for New Yorkers, and that is why we continue to say we need.
The mayor now wants to cut $500 million from education in order to deal with the influx of illegal immigrants. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
And to the Middle East, humanitarian conditions in Gaza continue to deteriorate as the fighting between Hamas and Israel persists. But the region expects it will soon get some relief after the United Nations voted to expedite humanitarian aid to Palestinians in Gaza. The U.S. and Russia both abstaining from the vote. A group of Arab nations originally wanted the resolution to demand an end to the hostilities, but in an effort to prevent the U.S. from vetoing it, the text was changed at the last minute. Instead of a ceasefire, it calls for humanitarian pauses to allow food, water, and fuel into Gaza. The resolution also demands 130 hostages held by Hamas, including Americans, to be released without conditions. Even though the U.S. abstained from voting for it, the Biden administration still allowed the resolution to pass. Some critics argue it was a wrong choice on the part of the U.S. because the resolution does not condemn Hamas's attack on Israel, nor does it condemn terrorists for using sexual violence as a weapon of war, and draws moral comparisons between Israel and Hamas. Also, moments ago, President Biden signed the National Defense Authorization Act, otherwise known as the NDAA, totaling of $886 billion. It includes the biggest military pay raise in over 2 decades, but also extends the controversial federal spying powers, otherwise known as FISA. Meanwhile, a separate $105 billion in national security package is up for debate, focusing on foreign aid and border security policy changes. Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.